amazing work in the world. You really are. Okay, we're live. We're live. We're live. Everybody, we're live. Okay, I'm going to do a couple of checks here and just make sure. I'm going to close out a few windows so my bandwidth is good. Make sure that you've only got this one window open. Don't let's just schmooze for a couple of minutes and then I will officially introduce you because I just want to give everybody a moment to come join the live feed. Okay, let's see if we are live here. I'm not seeing it here. Okay, how about you, Kulvi? Are you seeing it anywhere? There we are. This one window open. Okay, there we are live, and then we're also in the Soul Fest group. Hey, everybody at Soul Fest.
Hi.
We're going live in 5 different places. Okay, everybody. So here it is. We are live on Facebook and also on YouTube. And my guest today is quite an amazing young woman. And I say young woman because I think you're young enough to be my daughter, Kulvi. Like you are crazy amazing. She is an
live.
Here we go. Dr. Kulvi is an epigenetics scientist. She's got her doctorate from Oxford University over in the UK. She is amazing. I've worked with her before. She was part of the Celebrate Your Life Speakers program. She was actually one of the winners of the Celebrate Your Life Speakers program because her information is absolutely groundbreaking, and especially in the field of epigenetics. So, huge welcome to the official Dr. Kulvi Kaur. Yay!
Thank you. It's so good to be here with you again, Liz.
Oh, Kulvi, you're just amazing. You just are such a bright light of joy and light and peace in this world. And it's always a pleasure to talk with you. And I've actually done the epigenetics testing, which was extremely fascinating. So let's start from the beginning. Let's talk a little bit about and hey, everybody's saying hi, Leslie, and everybody's here. The gang's all here. Rosanna's
hi, guys.
here. Leslie's here. Michelle. Hi, Michelle. Oh, you guys are going to love this conversation. Kulvi is just an absolutely brilliant woman. So, okay, let's take a step back and talk about epigenetics. Can you explain all about epigenetics, what it's all about, and why it's so hot right now? It's like one of the hottest topics everybody's talking about, and Dr. Bruce Lipton's work as well.
Absolutely. Well, it's relevant right now because epigenetics is the science of how our cells and our bodies respond to our environment. And I'm just thinking back to our last interview. It was only in February. And boy, how much has our environment changed in these last few months? And so, yeah, we can pretty much guarantee that on a cellular level, all of us have very different epigenetic profiles right now compared to what they were back in January, February of this year when we last spoke.
And so what kind of information, as an epigenetic scientist, what do you think is the most valuable piece of information a person gains from your work?
I think it's probably, at least for me personally, it's been where I am in my cellular journey. Are my cells reflecting my current environment accurately? And maybe to go into a little bit more detail about what I mean by that is epigenetics is relevant to how our cells respond to our environment right now, but epigenetics also carries the stories of our ancestral lineage. It carries the stories of our childhoods. And so it's a really valuable tool for looking at how much of our how much of our body is a reflection of our current reality versus how much of our body is still playing out the stories that our grandparents needed to know, or our inner child needs us to know, or our teenage person needs us to know. And it plays out over and over and over again. It plays out in our health, it plays out in our thoughts, it plays out in our actions. And it can be very empowering to know this information. And it can also enable us to really move through the world very differently, from a different space, a space potentially of more compassion, of more awareness, of more understanding. So it really, for me at least, as an epigenetics geek, To me, it's the key. Actually, as chance would have it, I have a really, it's serendipity. I had 3 individuals who I did an epigenetic and methylation test. So in January of this year, I measured the baseline of 3 individuals of where they were in their methylation, which is methylation is my favorite epigenetic marker. And methylation is, they're just little molecules that sit on your DNA and tell which bits of DNA to light up and which bits of DNA that they're not needed at that current moment in time. And so I got a baseline of 3 individuals, and actually the end of their study is coming up at the end of June. So I can't imagine a more perfect timeline of being able to watch somebody's cellular journey through this last 6 months, probably, at least for me personally, the most transformative 6 months of my life. And I have cellular markers of that right now for 3 very different people as well. So it's
I wonder if we should do mine again.
Yeah, absolutely.
We did mine right before this whole thing started. That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I loved the information that you shared with me. I mean, it was so fascinating. It was so fascinating. So can you share, and by the way, if any of you have any questions as I'm talking with Dr. Kulvi, please do me a favor and just post your questions as we're talking, because she is just a wealth of information, and any questions you might have. I don't know, you probably can't answer anything about their genetics without seeing testing, but about her work and about epigenetics in general would be amazing if any of you have any questions about this. What I found most fascinating, so I did have my genetics tested. It's not a genetics test, and this was the misnomer. Kind of explain a little bit that it's not a genetics test for to see if you have like breast cancer gene or cancer gene. So can you explain a little bit more in detail what is extracted from the test itself?
Absolutely. So the test we did for you actually is a little bit different to a methylation test. So a methylation test changes over the course of your life in response to your environment. The test that we did with you actually was a test to look at your body's capacity for methylation, your capacity for detoxification, your capacity for breaking down neurotransmitters. Those can give you information on how rapidly you metabolize, what foods you like, what foods are going to be in line with your physiology, how you think, potentially your cardiovascular system, and all of that can feed into. So what we can do with that information is say, oh, this is your beautiful blueprint, and this part of your blueprint is working really, really, really well. So your detoxification pathway is working brilliantly. And there's another part of your blueprint that actually isn't able to keep up with that pathway because that's working so well. So we're going to elevate this part of your whole, your holistic body functions and make sure that everything is working harmoniously together. And so then we can we'll do that as your baseline. And then what we can do is then take the information. So you will apply a lifestyle change in response to that information based on your baseline. And then we can measure how well that lifestyle change is impacting you by looking at your epigenetic methylation status. So they're a little bit different, but they're both very empowering pieces of information. For me personally, I haven't enjoyed so much during my career of providing information about predisposition to a given disease. And as I move deeper into my career, I'm not even necessarily sure whether that model of genetics fits with my current reality or with my current epigenetic status. I love the idea that we can empower somebody with the information that's coded in their genetics to have their cells better or to create a better environment for their cells to live in.
I found all the information so fascinating. And what was really great is that when you tested me, so we've got a couple of questions here, and I'll go to that in a second. What is the testing and how does it work? And Dr. Kulvi will explain that. And please know that we're not trying to sell testing here. We just actually came on to have a conversation about epigenetics and her work as a scientist. So this is not about selling anybody tests. It's really just about how it works. But what I did find very interesting with the testing is that you nailed it exactly what goes on for my stomach and what exactly goes on for, this was the best thing you ever said to me, is that I have a double whammy of the sweet tooth gene.
I remember that.
I know. And then the brain thing, she said to me, I've only seen 3 brains like this out of thousands and thousands.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband Jeff was on the call as well, and he's like, "Oh, really? That's what's going on. She's got a real brain." So it was extremely fascinating. So someone does have a question, so let me go ahead and read it. The question is, when someone has a diagnosis of PTSD, CPTSD, and goes through intense healing protocols to rewire the nervous system and reprogram neural development, would these changes be seen on the testing universe?
Absolutely. In fact, we're just coming to the end of a study of 40 veterans with PTSD, where we've actually done this level of testing on them and introduced different lifestyle interventions based on their genetic testing. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think it should be an empowering piece of information. What I think the crucial part to me about epigenetic testing is that the yogis have always known this. The healers have always known this. Spirit has always known that our bodies, when it's in joy, that joy is reflected in our cells. Having a number of that is valuable to make it accessible potentially to a larger population, or to make more individuals aware of just how powerful they are. But it doesn't, having the number is an extra piece of the puzzle, but it doesn't take away from the fact that we inhabit this miraculous body, this miraculous machine that houses us, that is very, very responsive to our thoughts, to our actions, to our environments, to our history. And that's really what excites me about epigenetics, is just being in awe of this amazing machine. And then, yeah, it's cool to me. I mean, I'm a science geek, so I love looking at somebody's methylation profile and seeing, well, wow, this is where you were 6 months ago, and look at where you've come to, look at what you've done, look at what you've achieved, look where we can take you, and you're amazing.
You just, whenever I talk to you, I just feel so filled with grace, because your energy is so, you are just such a grace-filled beam of light. You really are, Kulvi. I mean, this is just beautiful work that you're doing in the world. So we do have some questions. All right, so Tanya's asking, do you see an overlap with this and Ayurveda? So do you see an overlap with this type of work and Ayurvedic medicine?
Absolutely. In fact, I've studied that, and the doshas, I like to play games, because I think it should be fun and joyful. And I love to look at somebody's genetic profile and then think, or guess what their dosha is, their Ayurvedic dosha. For those who aren't familiar, just your body's constitution, how your body, what foods your body likes to eat, or what kind of meditations your body is, or what kind of yoga your body should go through. And actually, yeah, we definitely do see that there are particular genetic profiles that you can look at that are more prevalent in kaphas, and particular genetic profiles that are more prevalent in vatas, and genetic profiles that are more prevalent in pittas. It's fascinating. Like the ancient wisdom traditions knew this, and we have a different language on it now. We can say, well, yes, all vatas have monoamine oxidase homozygous mutations in blah blah blah, but the ancient yogis just knew it and they applied it. And sometimes I think we've gone so far away from that wisdom that we used to have, that having this new language to apply to that wisdom, maybe hopefully in some ways might bring us back to that. But absolutely, the answer to your questions, yes, you can see genetic profiles that respond to particular doshas.
Well, I mean, you're basically saying, with all of this is not the whole thing with epigenetics, but would you agree with the statements, if our thoughts can make us sick, then our thoughts can make us well?
Without a shadow of a doubt. And now we get to watch it happening in our cells. That's the only difference. I think, again, we knew this, but now we get to take a little pinprick of blood and say, this is where you are right now, and these are the things. Well, let's see if we can introduce a change in your lifestyle and see where you are in 3 months' time, but with more positive thoughts.
Elizabeth has a question. Elizabeth Dunlap has a question, and it's, I hold my stress and anxiety in my stomach. Ooh, welcome to the club, Elizabeth. Any advice for her?
Any advice for Elizabeth? Well, actually, that a lot of that. So, and we haven't even touched on the microbiome, but the microbiome is akin to us. The bacterial composition of the gut is really akin to a second brain. And so for me personally, I found that actually managing my microbiome has been really helpful in my stress levels. I've got a quick anecdote, but which is actually fascinating to me. There's a wonderful TED talk out there actually of a lady, a microbiome specialist, who sat next to a gentleman at a party, and from the scent on his breath, she could tell that something was completely off in his microbiome. And with her awareness of knowing that microbiome is a second brain, she was really concerned about him, and she really wanted to say something. I guess social etiquette dictated at the time, at least, that she didn't say anything. And then a few days later, this gentleman actually he committed suicide. His microbiome was so off, and she's actually used that as a platform to really launch her work of the understanding of actually something physiological happening in his gut. The composition of bacteria in his gut was causing such an imbalance in his brain that it caused him to take that action. And we haven't even touched on the miracle of our human body.
Okay, I just want to stop for a second. Wow.
That's
huge. Okay, is everybody getting how wow that is, what you just said? What Dr. Kulvi that was amazing information. So what comes first? This is the chicken and the egg, right? So what comes first? Is it the stress and the anxiety that then creates the you're saying microbiome with an L?
Microbiome.
Biome with an M.
Mm-hmm.
So is it the microbiome that gets off and then the emotions come, or the emotions happen and then the microbiome gets triggered?
I believe in equilibrium. I think that we're in a really interesting, it's balanced. So I think that our stress and anxiety can absolutely impact our biome. So we've seen that, how the biome changes in response to our emotions, in response to the hormones that we're emitting, in response to the chemicals that are moving through our body. And then it can become a cycle. And the converse of that, when we start, we're amazing. I just can't emphasize
what you're doing is so unbelievable. That's like such great information, that this is like, because Greg Braden talks about the heart actually being very synonymous also to the brain. And now we're finding out that the stomach is also, like a thinking, feeling organ as well.
It was, I think, maybe 3 years ago that scientists say we've discovered a new organ in the human body, and it was the gut integument. And so when we have a gut feeling, that's very, very, very real. That's absolutely something that we should honor and recognize. And
Elizabeth, are you getting all of this? This is very good for the two of us who deal with these kind of things. The two Elizabeths. So fascinating. Okay, so there's a bunch of other questions, but I'm so fascinated about this. We're going to have a longer conversation. All right, so here we go up here. Janet has a question. Well, a really quick, let me go to Janet first, and then Tanya, I'll come back to your question. My friend, Janet is sharing, my friend has an undiagnosed illness, which is quite debilitating, with symptoms similar to MS, but until she has a diagnosis, it can't be treated. Can epigenetics be used to give clues as to what is wrong?
Yeah, I would say so without knowing all of the details. But I personally use epigenetic or methylation status for the way that I've seen it used in the past is to look at which genes are switched on and which genes are switched off at a given moment in time, and then evaluate a person's lifestyle in response to that. So it's not answering your question. In fact, I ought to also, full disclosure, say I don't know as an answer to your question, and offer that we see gene expression profiles, which are the downstream. Epigenetics creates a gene expression profile, and a gene expression is which genes are switched on or lit up and which genes are switched off at a given moment in time. So you can get a snapshot of that. One of the things that I love about epigenetics, and there's a great study that came out of Harvard showing this, is that they looked at an individual snapshot at time 0 and then after 15 minutes of meditation, and saw that it had completely changed. The genes that were switched on at the beginning were the genes that were involved in stress response, and the genes that were switched on at the end were the genes that were involved in longevity. I think something that you said was really interesting to me. You said without a diagnosis, it can't be treated. And I'm not a medical doctor, and I think that we have space in our lives to treat anything and everything, even if it doesn't have a label attached to it, through our thoughts, through our actions, through our words, through our environment. And again, I don't want to take away from what your friend is experiencing, but creating more space in her life for healing may well be helpful for that. And everybody's different. Some people's genetic predisposition, they were born with more space for this level of healing, and for some individuals they need additional support to come into that space. But we get to meet everybody exactly where they are in their lives and bring them home and bring them to that space where they can express healing in their genes. I hope that's helpful.
You guys, isn't this cool? Isn't she amazing? I just love all of that. Okay, so Tanya is asking, are there connections to epigenetics and blood type?
Oh, you know what, Tanya? I don't know. I suspect so. Actually, I don't know. I think our blood type is more determined by our genetics, by our genetic baseline. So the way I like to distinguish genetics from epigenetics is that our genetics is the 10% of our genome, or all of the genes in our body that account for our physical form, for our eye color, for our hair color, for our body type, for our all of our physical traits. Where epigenetics works actually, and I think that blood type actually comes under a physiological trait, where epigenetics comes in is in the other 90% of our DNA. And originally that 90% of our DNA was actually labeled as junk DNA. But it's that night. So scientists didn't study it. They thought that that was pointless. But it's fascinating to me that, we as human beings have these incredible bodies, and then we decide that 90% of what codes for our body is junk because we don't understand it.
Right.
And that's a really important point, I think, because we don't understand. I know I've gone so far away from your question. I think that our blood type is encoded by our genetics, but I think that calling something junk because we don't understand it is really, and it's really a strong indicator of how language and how our thoughts can really, our words can really impact our thoughts and how we approach something. And again, that idea, I still can't get that sentence that you said, without a diagnosis, she can't be treated, is really actually hurting my heart right now.
Of course it can be treated, yeah. Because, and how do you recommend someone getting started if there isn't an actual diagnosis? How do you recommend somebody getting started on the road to wellness or health, better health?
Yeah, for me, I will always look inside, and the first thing that my heart says is breathe, and not really breathe, like connect to the breath. There's so much power and healing in a deep cleansing breath, sound. There are some really beautiful studies coming out of, again, out of Harvard. These are the top universities in the world showing how sound current or how sound waves impact our gene expression. I often tell the story that the first time a yogi came to me and said, I broke my arm and I went to sound healing and fixed it through the power of sound, I thought she was stark raving bonkers. And
Wait a second. Hold on a second. Do you mean stark raving bonkers? You mean absolutely stark raving bonkers? Okay, go ahead. Just make sure that's exactly what you said.
But actually, the truth is that I was the stark raving bonkers one for not believing her truth. Her truth was her truth, and her truth was actually true. And now we have, it's called mechanobiology. We have mechanobiology scientists at Harvard showing how bone morphogenic protein is upregulated in response to sound current.
My mother was a sound healer. She was a classical musician and also a sound healer.
She
And
knew.
she absolutely knew. What she did was she had a I don't know what it was called, but she had a device where she would have people speak into a microphone, and then she had this machine where she could see what specific notes were missing from their voice, and she would find that the notes that were missing correlated with different physical and emotional issues.
Wow.
Holy shit, it was so ahead of its time, and unfortunately she's no longer in the physical to do this work. And then what she would do is, with the generator, she would feed that tone back into their body.
Wow.
I know. There is someone out there. I think the woman who actually developed the work might still be doing it, but it was so fascinating. Like, everything was so right on. When I was going through, my, menstrual cramps or depression or everything, those notes would actually be missing from my body. And then with the generator, I still have the equipment. I just don't know how to use it.
Amazing. Yeah, we should play
So
with that.
fascinating. I know. We need to resurrect my mom's sound healing equipment.
Yes.
Totally, yeah, really fascinating. And of course, the work that Barry Goldstein does with his healing sound work as well, and the tones that he's bringing in.
Yep. So I would absolutely offer, don't wait to have a label before you decide to heal. That's all.
Yeah.
Be labeled with any.
Yeah. Okay, so Bill has a question. Hi, Bill. Good to see you here, Bill. Dr. Kulvi, are you seeing effects resulting from the lack of human-to-human contact, isolation, face masks, or restrictions on group or family events?
I haven't personally studied that. What I know does impact us is our state of mind. And I have been doing a lot of research recently on how our epigenetic stories has played out on our state of mind during this time. So how, because people have responded so differently. We have a global situation where we're all experiencing a similar stimulus and similar environmental stimulus across the globe, and we have vastly different reactions and responses to that. And it's my personal belief that when we really tune into how is my body responding to the environmental stimulus of this virus or these global events, and we ask ourselves, is my personal response to this event a true reflection of the sights, the sounds, the touch, the taste, the smells that my body's receptors can receive? Am I responding from my truth? And a lot of the times we haven't been able to. And I think our capacity to not be able to is really very much coded in the stories that we have from our childhood, or the stories that we have from our grandparents, or the stories that we have from our teenage self. Mm-hmm. And so I think more so I would, and sorry, again, Bill, I don't necessarily know.
No, you're doing great.
But I would offer that if we're mindful of what stories we're telling ourselves during these global events, we can respond from a more heart-filled, truthful space to them. And I think that's the most important thing, to be responding rather than reacting from a heart space.
Oh, I love that. And it's learning how to do that on a consistent, regular basis. And honestly, it is practice.
It's a lifelong journey, but having the awareness, I think, gets you another step on your journey.
Okay, well, Ginger, I'm not quite sure that Dr. Kulvi can really answer this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. She's asking about food allergy testing via blood. Do you find that food allergy testings via blood is accurate? Or do you not really, that's not really?
Yeah, you can see I'm always really delighted to say I don't know, because those three words open up such a whole world of possibilities for anybody. Knowing is so finite. I think so. What we can tell from a genetic test of your blood is how well your body might break down sulfites, or how well your body breaks down amines, or how well your body metabolizes fats, for example. So we can look at the enzyme levels of each of those different parts of the metabolic processes. But in terms of, and those feed into food allergies, like histamine is an amine, for example. So if our body's constitution doesn't break down histamine very well, or amines very well, then we are likely to be more prone to allergic reactions. But yeah, I don't really know specifically.
Oh, okay. All right, so I'm going to see if there are any more questions. Everybody's making comments about how much they're loving this and how sound healing. I know Debbie just said, yes, sounds really affect her. You know, so interesting. I remember when all those years when I did get my period, when I menstruated, during that time, I could not stand loud noises. Just during those 7 days, I could not stand, like everything had to be very energetically gentle. And so sound really played a big part in like that healing process of my stomach.
Wow.
That's what you were talking about. Yeah.
Oh, don't get me started on how bacteria responds to sound. We've been talking about the microbiome earlier, but yeah, the microbiome. So there have been some fascinating tests done on bacteria in petri dishes with different sound currents exposed to those different.
Oh no, you have to tell us. Okay, expound on that. Tell us more. Tell us more. Okay.
It's actually a wonderful, and again, a lot of the work, I like to cite work from peer-reviewed papers, and I love to research, but there's a really beautiful study. Actually, it's looking at the different types of sound waves. So it looks at white noise versus alpha waves versus beta waves versus Z waves. Or Z waves. I don't really understand the different types of sound waves or the physics of it, but what they showed was how the mass of bacteria in this petri dish changed in response to the different types of sound current that they were exposed to. And so that's outside the body. You can just kind of begin to imagine how that's impacting the biome on our insides. We actually have more bacterial DNA in our body than we have human DNA. Our biome is so significant in our health and well-being.
I would love to get Barry Goldstein in on the conversation.
It works.
I know. And for those of you who don't know who Barry is, he is an absolutely amazing musician. And he's all about sound and sound healing. So he does a lot of the music that you hear in the meditations, like with Dr. Joe Dispenza, Neil Donald Walsh, Anita Morjani. So he does all of the sound healing behind it. I'm going to get the two of you in touch, because I think it would be really important for the two of you had a conversation. I would love for him to hear this. So Barry, I'm going to send you the link to this so you can hear this. He would love this. Yeah, I mean, I'm loving it. And I'm not a musician the way he is. Okay, what other questions do we have? Leslie, thank you. Okay, do you think any type of energy work can, oh, Kathy, really good question, Kathy. Do you think any type of energy work can change your DNA?
100%. That's really the basis of my life's work. And not just think, I know it, I see it. And that's, I guess, if I had to think about value, and again, we think about the ancient wisdom practitioners, they knew that they were changing the physiology of an individual. They might not have put that language on it, but they knew that the energetic transmission that they were offering to that individual was impacting them positively. And so now, as a scientist, what we can do is, again, watch how that impact plays out on a cellular level. It doesn't take away from how the energy healing is the potent thing in this process. That's what I really always feel it's important to emphasize. The energy healing was as valid before somebody put a number on it as it was after somebody put a number on it. And some people enjoy, me personally, I like having numbers on things. I like being able to see that this gene was methylated at time X and now it's demethylated at time Y. I think it's just fun. It's just interesting. But 100%, I think I love that question because it's important to me. I've experienced, I have personal experience of that, and so that's why it's so important to me. Energy healing is huge.
Huge. Kathy, did you get that? Huge. Okay. Debbie Lubinsky, that is a fantastic idea. Debbie wrote, OMG, a meditation healing for PMS and the week of our periods. That actually is brilliant. No, it's brilliant. I'm going to talk to Barry about that. Okay, and then Ivana had a really good question. Oops. She said, why, and I think this is going to lead to another question for you because she's specifically asking about sound, but I'm wondering other things you're going to have to say about this. It has to do with coronavirus. She said, why are they not trying to affect the coronavirus with sound and blast it out of the field? And what have you, I know that you had written me and you said you were doing some work with coronavirus. So can you talk a little bit about that?
I can. And the reason it hasn't been done is because that's not how we practice medicine, which to me is a great shame. You know, I was just listening to, was it Kathy who asked about energy healing?
Kathy did, yes.
And, you know, we have to start recognizing that this is the medicine of the future, that we are the physicians of the future, and that we can work alongside allopathic medicine or Western, whatever you want to call the medicine where you have a diagnosis and like we have to work. We have a part to play in medicine, and it's important that we stand up and say that. And the reason physicians have a part to play in medicine is because scientists support their work. Scientists give them numbers that then they can put in peer-reviewed papers and say this drug is effective because we saw that 30% of the patients recovered in response to taking this drug. We need to start doing these studies, but it's up to us. It's incumbent on us, actually, as a community to start stepping up and saying, well, actually, we have solutions too. And then it's actually incumbent on the scientists to start offering the solutions and the tools to put numbers on that too. If that's what we need as a society to know that something works, then we have to have the backing of the scientific community who will have access to those tools to give us those numbers. And absolutely, I believe that, well, we know that sound impacts pathogens. We've seen that. I mean, what we're just talking about with the bacteria, there probably are sound frequencies that can impact the structure of that the viral capsid. But that's not where the funding, unfortunately, goes into studying these things. The funding goes into many different things, but it doesn't go into looking at energy or sound and how that would break down the viral genome or the capsid.
Yeah, the money keeps going into what's going to feed the hands of the I couldn't think of the word. Pharmaceutical industry. I knew it began with the P, with the pharmaceutical industry. Yeah, it absolutely Yeah. Okay, so do you have some more time for some more questions?
I am having a great time. I'd love to take
Okay,
any.
good. Janet, and Janet's in the UK. So it's kind of late for her right now. She said, like the experiments, like Dr. Emoto's work, like the experiments where you tell water, either you love it or hate it and see the different results. Can you affect the DNA in your body in the same way? Yes, such a good question, Janet.
Such a good question. And Janet already knows the answer. I can absolutely offer you a resounding yes. And yet you already know the answer. The because you were born with the answer. I think because the essential part of you knows that that's true. The part of you that hasn't been hidden by history or by trauma or by society. Like when we really sit deeply within ourselves, sit within our hearts, we know the answers to all of these questions. And I feel greatly privileged. I had this incredible education and I got to collect all of these letters. And my yes is not more valid than your yes, though. It isn't. Just because I have letters, it doesn't make my yes any better or any worse than anybody else's yes. When you know something so deep in your heart, when you know something to your core, when you're connected to your truth, you know that your words, your feelings, your emotions, your thoughts, your environments impact you on a cellular level. You were just born knowing.
That was truth. Just shot right through me. That whoo. Okay. More questions. I love that because you're absolutely right, and we rely on other people for our answers. It's like we want confirmation. It's like, okay, I want confirmation of this belief. I want confirmation. If telling myself that I love myself, telling every single cell and pore of my body, does that make a difference? Can that have the ability to heal? And so
absolutely yes.
Yes. Okay, have we paired particular frequencies? Oh, okay, let me read the whole question. So have we paired particular frequencies to particular illnesses and cures? You mentioned bone healing. What about gut or headaches or sinus problems?
I've seen some of that research. Yes, there's a brilliant scientist in New York. Oh, Dr. Glenn Ryan's work, where he put DNA in, put a vial of DNA that he'd extracted in 4 different rooms. And in one of the rooms, he was playing pop music. In one, he was playing classical music. In one, he was playing Gregorian chants. And I think in the other, he was playing rock music. And then he looked at how much light the DNA could absorb, with light being a factor of how much the DNA had unwound. And he found that the DNA that was in the room where he was playing Gregorian chanting had actually absorbed more light than the DNA in all of the other rooms where they were playing classical music and pop music and rock music.
Really? Okay, guys, we're going to go get some Gregorian chants. Those Gregorian, I mean, they're beautiful. I mean, they're absolutely magnificent. Mm-hmm. Yeah, my mom used to have a whole series of Gregorian chants. Okay, so Gregorian chants is the answer.
Or anything. I mean, for me, Pink's the answer. I'm definitely sure that her music unwinds my DNA. I mean, I think it's also
is the answer. So Gregorian chants, what's going to be right for that particular DNA? So that's interesting. Okay, so let's back up a second. So doesn't it depend on the individual person's DNA and what would be right for them? So Gregorian chants might be right for that person's DNA, but it might not be right for mine. And Pink might be good for yours. Yeah. Aretha Franklin is good for mine.
Me too.
All day, every day.
Yeah, I think so. When our DNA is in a vial outside of the body, it doesn't have all of our own emotions and all of our own hormones and all our own chemicals impacting it. So it's going to be a very different answer. I think what's interesting about this study is to get a baseline of what music or what sounds the DNA enjoys when it's not in our body. But yeah, when we have everything else that's going on in our systems going, then we're unique individuals. We unique things bring us joy.
Wow. Okay. So, oh, Giovanna, exactly. She says, I'm an energy healer. And she says, I feel the impact of this kind of work, having been marginalized for so long. And all of your energy healers out there, this is now, how do I say this? This is another confirmation, another source of credibility, if you will, that energy healing is massively impactful on people's overall well-being, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. So yes, another confirmation for all of you beautiful healers out there. Oh, Debbie Lubinsky said Disney soundtracks are hers. That's what resonates.
Yes.
Okay, so here we go. To which extent one's belief in the effectiveness of epigenetics may affect their propensity to be treated with the techniques of epigenetics? That was a big sentence. So how does one beliefs affect
I think one of the cool things with this, with the technology that's available to us right now, is that you don't necessarily, when you see something written out on a piece of paper, that impacts your capacity to believe, because you have the visual stimulus of I don't know, zinc finger protein was methylated at time yesterday, and I don't know, tomorrow it's demethylated, and I've gone through a deep healing in that time. Maybe the time scale wasn't quite right there, but healing happens fast. And so so yes and no. I think your beliefs play an absolutely crucial part, and because technology has kind of caught up with the ancient wisdom yogis right now, the ancient wisdom traditions, you don't necessarily have to believe anymore. You can just see it, and see it to believe it type thing. But yeah, I guess you always knew. Those that always knew maybe potentially might have a more rapid shift or a greater shift. Although one of the studies that I looked at recently showed that people who were meditating for the first time had a much larger shift after. People who had been meditating for a long time had a much greater DNA shift versus people who were meditating for the first time when we looked at their DNA before and after a 15-minute meditation. So there's cumulative practice. There's a cumulative effect as well, I think.
Oh, so it's a much more dramatic effect, like the first time if they've never done it before, as opposed to someone that's really fascinating. Okay, we're going to wrap it up here, but just let me make sure. Okay, great. No more questions. Oh, I'm fascinated. Where can one go for epigenetics testing? Jennifer just asked that question. Where can one go? Like, if somebody wanted to get their own epigenetics tested, what lab, or do you have a recommendation of a place that somebody can go to get tested?
I don't really have any specific recommendations per se. I've got a little primer on my website of different of epigenetics and what epigenetics is and what epigenetics means, how we can use the power of epigenetics to support us. So the reason I'm reticent right now is because I'm not really sure whether this is a great forum to be speaking about specific tests, but I'm happy to share the information with you, Liz, and you can disseminate it. Or
I'm really comfortable. I wouldn't have asked the question if I wasn't comfortable. Oh. So do you want me to just go ahead and put does your website have more information about it?
Not really, actually.
You're a little bit self-promotion, guys, don't you think?
There are two labs that I personally like to work with, and I'm happy to share the information of the websites of those two labs in the comments if you like, if
Sure.
that would be helpful.
Absolutely. Go ahead and give that to me, and I can type it in.
Perfect. So it's epigeneticsrx.com is the place where I like to do my baseline testing.
GENETICS
Yeah.
RX.com. Okay, there we go. Let me make sure I did that right. So it's epigeneticsrx.com. That's where I do my testing, I think.
Correct, yes.
Right. Yeah. Send us Liz's results. Oh my God. Somebody wrote, Bill said, send us Liz's results. My results were really interesting because what was going on, I've had some, and I'm not shy to share this with anybody. I've had some stomach stuff and I've had lots of testing, and I shared that with Kulvi, but she had no idea what I'd really been going through. And the test came up. So I was really stunned. I was really stunned about what you said about my brain. Like, I was very stunned about that because you said that something about I adapt very, very easily to my environment. But it was really right on for the symptoms I was having with some of the stomach stuff. And of course, then you gave me supplements, which we have to follow up on and talk about. She also gave me recommendations. She didn't give me supplements, but gave me recommendations of supplements that I could take and foods to stay away from and those type of things. And it was just very fascinating. It explained a lot for me. It really explained a lot. So thank you for that. And everyone, thank you so much for joining us for this fantastic conversation today with Dr. Kulvi Kaur. And it has been such an honor and such a pleasure to have you with us again. We're going to do this again because everybody loves this conversation.
Wonderful. It's such a joy to be here, Liz. My genes are probably singing right now too. We should do a test before and after our conversations. They always make
it was so awesome. Oh, before we go, I can't even believe I'm forgetting to share this. And Tanya's probably in the background screaming, remember to share it, remember to share it. Okay, so tomorrow is June 20th. Tomorrow, we are officially celebrating the Mishka Productions 25th anniversary.
Congratulations!
We're celebrating our
remarkable.
It's 25 years, and sometimes I look back and I was like, "How has this been 25 years? Like, how has this happened?" So,
how many lives have you shifted in 25 years?
I don't know about that, but I'll tell you what. Here's what we're going to do tomorrow, and all of you come and join us. It's absolutely free, like totally free. We are doing a Mishka marathon tomorrow. From 10 a.m. We're doing a CYM Mishka Spiritual Marathon from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m. And every 15 minutes, we're going to have one of our speakers who has spoken at a Celebrate Your Life. Every 15 minutes, it's going to be just a round robin. So I can give you I'm going to post the schedule later, but Marianne Williamson will be with us. Dr. Bruce Lipton will be here. Greg Braden, Dr. Sue Mortar, Dr. Jill Bolte-Taylor, Sunny Dawn Johnston, James Twyman, James Redfield. So the gang is all getting to it. So it's from 10, and I'm going to be here live streaming. So it's going to happen here, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We'll post the schedule on all the social media outlets, but we're live streaming it in all the Facebook pages and on YouTube. And it's just going to be an all-day fun event.
I can't wait. How wonderful. Congratulations.
I know. And so everybody's just going to come in every 15 minutes. Someone else pops in and talks about what's going on for them and what's going on with their hot button, what their passion is right now, what they're teaching, what they're talking about. So
I can't wait.
I haven't even counted. Wait, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 hours of inspiration.
Oh my goodness. Amazing.
Exactly. And here's what's interesting. It's 6 hours of inspiration on the 6 months of the year on the 20th in 2020. 222, right? 2020. So we shall see all of you tomorrow. And Dr. Kulvi, thank you so much again for this conversation. Thank you.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Okay, stay right here just for a second while I end the broadcast. Bye, everybody.
Bye.